When the enemy commanders gathered around their maps that cold winter morning, they pointed to a small mark on the intelligence report. "Just a driver," one officer laughed, dismissing the threat entirely.
What could one woman possibly do? 3 hours later, 32 of their best soldiers lay dead, and the mysterious driver had vanished into the forest like smoke. The woman they called "just a driver" had just rewritten the rules of warfare, proving that the most dangerous enemy is often the one you never see coming.
This is the true story of how assumptions became tombstones, and how one woman's quiet strength became a legend that would echo through military history for generations. Sometimes, the most powerful weapon isn't what you carry in your hands. It's what burns silently in your heart. Elena Petrov never imagined that learning to drive her father's old truck would one day save hundreds of lives. Growing up in a small village outside Stalingrad, she was known as the quiet girl who could fix engines better than most men and navigate roads that didn't appear on any map. Her hands, small and steady, could coax life from dying motors and find paths through terrain that would challenge seasoned drivers. The year was 1942, and war had come to her doorstep like an unwelcome storm. German forces were advancing towards Stalingrad, and every day brought fresh rumors of villages burned and families scattered to the wind. Elena's village sat directly in the path of the advancing army, a small dot on a map that military planners would barely notice, but to the people living there, it was everything they had ever known. Elena's father, Dmitri, had been the village's only mechanic before the war took him away to fight on the Western Front. He left behind his garage, his tools, and his daughter, who had spent countless hours beside him learning the secrets of engines and the art of keeping vehicles running when spare parts were impossible to find. The garage became Elena's world, a place where she could lose herself in the familiar comfort of metal and oil, while the world outside grew increasingly dangerous. The villagers knew Elena could drive, but they saw her as just a girl playing with her father's trucks. She was 22 years old, with dark hair that she kept tied back in practical braids and grey eyes that seemed to notice everything while revealing nothing. She wore her father's old coveralls and spoke little, preferring the company of engines to the gossip and fears that filled the village square each evening. When the Soviet military recruiters came through the village looking for drivers, they almost passed Elena by entirely. The sergeant, a weathered man named Volkov, was looking for men who could handle military vehicles under combat conditions. He needed drivers who could navigate bomb-cratered roads, maintain their vehicles in the field, and keep supply lines moving under enemy fire. Elena watched from the garage doorway as he interviewed the handful of men who remained in the village. One by one, the potential recruits failed his practical tests. Some could drive but knew nothing about repairs. Others understood mechanics but had never driven anything larger than a farm cart. The sergeant grew increasingly frustrated as the day wore on. He needed drivers desperately and time was running out. It was Elena's neighbor, old Mrs. Kozlov, who finally pointed toward the garage. "You should talk to the Petrov girl," she told the sergeant. "She's been driving and fixing trucks since she was 14. Her father taught her everything he knew before the war took him." Sergeant Volkov looked skeptical. He had never worked with female drivers, and the idea seemed impractical for the dangerous missions ahead. But desperation makes people flexible, and he was running out of options. He walked to the garage where Elena was rebuilding a transmission, her hands moving with practiced precision among the gears and springs. "Can you drive?" he asked without introduction. Elena looked up from her work, wiping her hands on a rag. "Yes? Military vehicles? Under fire?" She considered this for a moment. "I can drive anything with an engine. I don't know about being shot at, but I suppose that's something you learn by doing." The sergeant appreciated her honesty. Too many recruits claimed they were ready for anything without understanding what war really meant. He decided to test her skills. "Show me," he said simply. Elena led him to her father's truck, a battered vehicle that had seen better days but still ran smoothly under her care. She started the engine with a few expert adjustments to the choke and throttle, then drove through a course that the sergeant improvised using barrels and stakes. She navigated tight turns, backed into narrow spaces, and demonstrated a feel for the vehicle that impressed even the skeptical sergeant. More importantly, when he asked her to diagnose a problem with his military jeep, she identified a clogged fuel line within minutes and had it fixed in 20. She worked efficiently and quietly, explaining what she was doing in simple, clear terms that showed she understood not just how to fix things but why they broke in the first place. "The army needs drivers," Sergeant Volkov told her as she finished the repair. "It's dangerous work. Supply runs through enemy territory, evacuation missions under fire, sometimes combat situations. Are you interested?" Elena thought about her empty village, her father fighting somewhere far away, and the advancing enemy forces that grew closer each day. She thought about the skills she had learned in this garage and how they might serve a larger purpose than just keeping farm trucks running. "When do I leave?" she asked. The sergeant smiled for the first time that day. "Tomorrow morning. Bring whatever tools you can carry and clothes for cold weather. Everything else will be provided." That night, Elena packed her father's toolkit, her warmest clothes, and a small photograph of her family taken before the war changed everything. She walked through the village one last time, memorizing the faces of neighbors who might not survive what was coming. She said goodbye to Mrs. Kozlov, who pressed a small icon into her hands for protection. As dawn broke over the village, Elena climbed into the passenger seat of Sergeant Volkov's jeep. She had never been more than 50 kilometers from home, and now she was heading toward a war that would test every skill she had ever learned, and some she had never imagined needing. The sergeant glanced at her as they drove away from everything she had ever known. "Second thoughts?" he asked. Elena watched her village disappear behind them and felt something settle in her chest, a quiet determination that she didn't fully understand yet. "No," she said. "I'm ready." She had no way of knowing that within 3 months she would become one of the most feared drivers on the Eastern Front, or that enemy soldiers would learn to dread the sound of her engine in the distance. She only knew that she could drive, she could fix things, and somewhere in the chaos ahead, those skills would be needed. The jeep carried them toward Stalingrad, toward a destiny that would transform the quiet girl from the garage into something the enemy would never see coming. Behind them, the village grew smaller until it was just another dot on the vast landscape, but ahead lay opportunities that would challenge everything Elena thought she knew about herself and her capabilities. As they drove through the morning mist, neither Elena nor Sergeant Volkov could have predicted that they were beginning a journey that would make history. Sometimes the most extraordinary stories begin with the simplest decisions, made by people who never intended to become heroes but found themselves rising to meet impossible circumstances.
The war was about to discover what Elena Petrov could really do.
The training camp outside Stalingrad was a world of mud, shouting, and the constant smell of diesel fuel mixed with fear. Elena found herself among 60 other new drivers, and she was the only woman. The other recruits stared at her with mixtures of curiosity, skepticism, and outright hostility. Some whispered that having a woman in their unit was bad luck. Others questioned whether she could handle the physical demands of the job. Elena ignored the whispers and focused on the training. She learned to drive half-tracks through obstacle courses designed to simulate bomb craters and collapsed bridges. She practiced night driving with minimal lights, navigating by touch and instinct when visibility dropped to mere meters. Most importantly, she learned to maintain her vehicles under combat conditions, making repairs while artillery shells exploded in the distance and enemy aircraft strafed nearby roads. The training instructor was Captain Boris Medvedev, a veteran driver who had survived the early disasters of the German invasion. He was missing 2 fingers on his left hand, courtesy of shrapnel from a German dive bomber. And he had little patience for recruits who couldn't adapt quickly to the realities of mechanized warfare. Captain Medvedev watched Elena carefully during her first week. He had his doubts about female drivers, not because he questioned their courage, but because the physical demands of the job often broke men twice her size. Combat driving meant wrestling heavy steering wheels for hours at a time, loading and unloading supplies under fire, and sometimes fighting hand-to-hand when vehicles broke down in enemy territory. But Elena surprised him. She was stronger than she looked, with the kind of wiry endurance that came from years of physical labor. More importantly, she had an intuitive understanding of vehicles that couldn't be taught. When other drivers struggled with mechanical problems, Elena would often diagnose the issue by sound alone, identifying engine troubles that experienced mechanics might miss. During her 3rd week of training, Elena received her first real test. A supply convoy had broken down 40 kilometers from the camp, stranded in territory that German patrols regularly swept. The convoy was carrying medical supplies desperately needed at a field hospital, and Captain Medvedev needed someone to retrieve the stranded vehicles and their cargo. "It's dangerous," he told the assembled drivers. "German patrols are active in that area, and the roads are in terrible condition. I need someone who can fix whatever's wrong with those trucks and get them moving again, preferably without getting killed in the process." Several experienced drivers volunteered, but Captain Medvedev's eyes settled on Elena. Something about her quiet confidence during training had impressed him, and he wanted to see how she would handle real pressure. "Petrov," he said, "take the recovery truck. Bring those vehicles home." Elena nodded and began her preparations. She checked the recovery truck thoroughly. loading extra tools, spare parts, and emergency supplies. She studied the route carefully, noting alternate paths in case the main road proved impassable. Then she set out alone, driving through countryside that bore the scars of recent fighting. The landscape she drove through told the story of war's progression. Burned-out farmhouses stood empty beside fields cratered by artillery shells. Abandoned vehicles, both German and Soviet, lined the roads like metal tombstones. The air smelled of smoke and something else, something organic and unpleasant that Elena tried not to think about too carefully. She found the stranded convoy exactly where it was supposed to be, but the situation was worse than expected. 3 trucks had broken down, their drivers huddled around a small fire that provided more psychological comfort than actual warmth. The vehicles were loaded with desperately needed medical supplies, morphine, and antibiotics that could mean the difference between life and death for wounded soldiers. Elena introduced herself to the senior driver, a grizzled sergeant named Petrov, who shared her last name but no relation. He explained the problem. All 3 trucks had suffered fuel system failures after driving through water that turned out to be contaminated with debris from a destroyed German supply depot. Clogged fuel lines, Elena diagnosed after a quick inspection. The debris is acting like sandpaper inside the system. We need to drain everything, clean the lines, and replace the filters. It was a time-consuming job under the best circumstances, and these weren't the best circumstances. They were working in the open, exposed to potential enemy observation, and darkness was approaching rapidly. Sergeant Petrov suggested abandoning the vehicles and extracting just the medical supplies, but Elena shook her head. "We can fix this," she said. "Give me 2 hours." She worked with focused intensity, her hands moving efficiently through the complex process of cleaning contaminated fuel systems. The other drivers helped as much as they could, but this was specialist work that required skills most of them didn't possess. Elena traced fuel lines, cleared blockages, and rebuilt filters using spare parts she had brought and improvised materials scavenged from damaged vehicles. As she worked, Elena became aware of engine sounds in the distance. German patrol vehicles, moving along parallel roads, searching for targets of opportunity. The sounds grew closer, then faded, then approached again from a different direction. The enemy was conducting a systematic sweep of the area, and it was only a matter of time before they investigated the area where the convoy was stranded. "How much longer?" Sergeant Petrov asked nervously, listening to the approaching engines. "Almost finished," Elena replied, her voice calm despite the growing danger. She was installing the last clean fuel filter, her movements swift but careful. One mistake now would doom all of them. The German engines grew louder, definitely approaching their location. Elena finished the repair and moved to the next truck. This one had suffered more severe damage, with debris actually puncturing the fuel tank. She sealed the puncture with a field repair technique her father had taught her, using metal patches and industrial adhesive that would hold long enough to get the vehicle home. As she worked on the 3rd truck, the German patrol finally appeared. 3 armored cars emerged from the tree line, their crews scanning the area for signs of Soviet activity. The stranded convoy was hidden in a depression beside the road, but their position wouldn't remain secret for long. Elena made a decision that would define the rest of her military career. Instead of hiding with the others, she climbed into the recovery truck and started the engine. The massive vehicle roared to life, its powerful motor echoing across the landscape. Then she drove straight toward the German patrol. The German soldiers were initially confused by the sight of a lone Soviet vehicle approaching their position. They expected ambushes, retreating enemies, or desperate last stands, but not a single truck driving directly toward them with apparent confidence. Elena used their confusion to her advantage, driving as if she belonged exactly where she was. As she approached the lead German vehicle, Elena suddenly swerved off the road and drove directly through their formation, scattering the armored cars and forcing them to reposition. The Germans opened fire, but Elena was already moving, using the recovery truck's size and momentum to bulldoze through obstacles and terrain that the lighter German vehicles couldn't follow. She led them on a wild chase across broken ground, drawing them away from the stranded convoy and into terrain where their superior firepower counted for less than her superior knowledge of the local area. Elena had studied every map of this region during her training, and she used that knowledge now to lead the Germans through a maze of ravines and soft ground that slowed their pursuit. The chase lasted for 30 minutes, with Elena staying just ahead of the German vehicles while leading them in a wide circle away from the convoy. Finally, she drove the recovery truck into a narrow ravine where the German armored cars couldn't follow, then abandoned the vehicle and made her way back to the convoy position on foot. She arrived to find all 3 trucks repaired and ready to move. The drivers had used the time she bought them to complete the repairs she had started, following her instructions and improvising solutions when problems arose. The convoy was ready to move, and the German patrol was still searching for Elena's recovery truck in the wrong direction. The convoy made it back to base without further incident, delivering their crucial medical supplies and proving that Elena Petrov was more than just a driver. Word of her tactical thinking and mechanical skills spread quickly through the unit. She had not only solved a complex technical problem under pressure, but she had also demonstrated an understanding of combat tactics that impressed even veteran officers. Captain Medvedev called Elena into his office the next morning. "That was good work yesterday," he told her. "Creative thinking, solid execution, and no unnecessary heroics. You saved those supplies and those men." Elena accepted the praise with characteristic modesty, but inside she felt something new. For the first time in her life, she had found something she was genuinely good at, something that mattered, in ways that went beyond fixing farm trucks or maintaining village generators. She had discovered that her mechanical skills and driving ability could save lives and serve a purpose larger than herself.
"I have a new assignment for you," Captain Medvedev continued.
Special operations, reconnaissance missions, behind enemy line supply runs, and extraction operations. It's dangerous work, but I think you're ready for it. Elena nodded her acceptance. She had no way of knowing that this assignment would put her on a collision course with the enemy forces that would soon learn to fear the sound of her engine. The quiet girl from the village garage was about to become something much more dangerous, and the war was about to discover what happened when you underestimated Elena Petrov. As she left Captain Medvedev's office, Elena felt the weight of new responsibilities settling on her shoulders. She was no longer just a driver learning to survive in wartime. She was becoming a weapon, carefully crafted and precisely aimed at the heart of enemy operations. The transformation was just beginning. Elena's new assignment came with a new vehicle, a modified Willys Jeep that had been captured from the Germans and extensively rebuilt by Soviet engineers. The Jeep was painted in standard German camouflage patterns, complete with authentic markings that would pass casual inspection. More importantly, it had been fitted with extra fuel tanks, hidden weapon compartments, and communication equipment that would allow Elena to operate independently deep behind enemy lines. Major Viktor Sokolov briefed Elena on her new role in a secure room beneath the base headquarters. The Major was responsible for special operations in the Stalingrad sector, coordinating missions that required unusual skills and exceptional courage. He had requested Elena specifically after hearing reports of her improvised tactical thinking during the convoy rescue. "Your job is reconnaissance and disruption," Major Sokolov explained, pointing to positions marked on a detailed map. "German supply lines run through this area, carrying ammunition, fuel, and reinforcements to their forward positions. We need to know their schedules, their security arrangements, and their vulnerabilities." Elena studied the map carefully, noting the road networks and terrain features that would affect her operations. The area was heavily forested, with numerous small roads and paths that weren't marked on standard military maps. It was perfect territory for someone who could navigate by instinct and improvise solutions to unexpected problems. "Intelligence gathering is your primary mission," the Major continued. "But if opportunities arise to disrupt enemy operations without compromising your cover, you're authorized to take action. Your mechanical skills make you particularly valuable for sabotage operations." Elena's first mission took her 40 kilometers behind German lines, driving through territory that had been under enemy control for weeks. She traveled mainly at night, using roads that German patrols rarely monitored, and during the day, she hid the Jeep in carefully chosen locations where it would blend with the surrounding terrain. The German camouflage worked perfectly. When she encountered enemy patrols, Elena simply waved and continued driving, appearing to be just another German driver moving supplies or carrying messages. Her dark hair was hidden under a military cap, and from a distance, she looked like any other soldier in German uniform. But Elena was gathering intelligence with every kilometer she drove. She noted the locations of fuel depots, ammunition storage areas, and vehicle maintenance facilities. She observed patrol patterns, counted convoy sizes, and identified the types of equipment the Germans were moving through their supply network. Most importantly, she began to understand the rhythm of enemy operations, the predictable patterns that she could exploit. Her breakthrough came during her fourth mission, when she discovered a German maintenance depot hidden in a forest clearing 20 kilometers behind the front lines. The depot serviced vehicles for 3 different German divisions, repairing everything from motorcycles to heavy tanks. Elena observed the facility for 2 days, learning the schedules of the mechanics and guards. The depot was vulnerable because it relied on a single power generator to operate the machine shop and provide lighting for night work. Elena recognized the generator model immediately, a German-built unit that she had studied during her technical training. More importantly, she knew exactly how to disable it in a way that would look like mechanical failure rather than sabotage. On her third night of observation, Elena made her move. She waited until the guards changed shifts, then infiltrated the depot and made her way to the generator building. Working by touch in complete darkness, she carefully loosened critical engine components and introduced debris into the fuel system. The damage would cause the generator to fail gradually over several hours, with increasingly frequent breakdowns that would frustrate the mechanics trying to keep it running. But Elena wasn't finished. She also tampered with the depot's vehicle repair equipment, making subtle adjustments that would cause tools to malfunction and repairs to fail at crucial moments. She loosened bolts on engine hoists, contaminated lubricants with abrasive compounds, and adjusted critical measurements on precision instruments. Each act of sabotage was carefully calculated to appear accidental, while causing maximum disruption to German repair operations. The results exceeded her expectations. Over the following week, Elena monitored German radio communications and observed the depot's operations from a distance. The generator failures had shut down all machine shop operations, forcing the Germans to attempt repairs by lamplight and flashlight. The sabotaged repair equipment caused numerous accidents and forced the mechanics to start many jobs over again when critical components failed at crucial moments. Most importantly, the depot's problems created a backlog of disabled vehicles that couldn't be returned to combat. Tanks with minor mechanical problems sat for days waiting for repairs that should have taken hours. Artillery pieces remained immobilized because spare parts couldn't be manufactured on site. The ripple effect spread through 3 German divisions, reducing their operational capability and forcing them to rely on increasingly stretched supply lines. Elena's success brought her to the attention of higher headquarters, and her missions became increasingly sophisticated. She began working with partisan groups operating in the same territory, providing them with intelligence about German movements and coordinating attacks on vulnerable targets. Her mechanical expertise became invaluable to sabotage operations that required technical knowledge to execute properly. During one memorable mission, Elena infiltrated a German fuel depot and contaminated their entire gasoline supply with substances that would cause engine failures throughout their motor pool. She carefully calculated the chemical mixture to create problems that would appear gradually, avoiding immediate detection while ensuring maximum long-term damage. Hundreds of German vehicles would suffer mysterious engine problems over the following weeks, with many requiring complete engine rebuilds that consumed precious resources and skilled mechanics. But Elena's most significant contribution came through her intelligence gathering. She developed an encyclopedic knowledge of German supply operations in her sector, learning to predict their movements and identify their most critical vulnerabilities. Her reports provided headquarters with detailed information about enemy strength, equipment, and intentions that proved invaluable for planning larger operations. As winter approached, Elena received her most dangerous assignment yet. German forces were preparing a major offensive, and Soviet intelligence needed detailed information about their preparations. Elena would have to penetrate deeper into enemy territory than ever before, spending weeks behind German lines while gathering intelligence about troop concentrations, equipment staging areas, and attack plans. The mission required Elena to establish a semi-permanent base of operations in German-controlled territory. She chose an abandoned farmhouse that provided good concealment for her vehicle, while offering excellent observation points for monitoring nearby road networks. The farmhouse became her headquarters for what would prove to be her most successful period of operations. From this base, Elena conducted increasingly bold reconnaissance missions. She observed German headquarters meetings by hiding in buildings adjacent to command posts. She counted tanks and artillery pieces being moved forward for the offensive. She intercepted communications by monitoring German radio networks from carefully chosen listening posts. Most importantly, she began to identify the key vulnerabilities in German preparations that could be exploited to disrupt their plans. Elena discovered that the German offensive depended heavily on a single bridge crossing a river 10 kilometers behind their lines. All heavy equipment and most supplies had to pass through this bottleneck, making it a crucial weak point in their entire operation. More importantly, Elena's technical knowledge allowed her to identify exactly how the bridge could be damaged to cause maximum disruption with minimal resources. The bridge was a modern steel structure that could support heavy tanks, but Elena recognized that its strength depended on critical stress points that could be targeted with shaped charges. If these points were damaged simultaneously, the bridge would collapse under the weight of the first heavy vehicle that attempted to cross it. The timing would be crucial, but if executed properly, the sabotage would trap German heavy equipment on the wrong side of the river, Just as their offensive was beginning, Elena radioed detailed plans for the bridge attack to headquarters, including precise specifications for the explosive charges and their placement. She also provided intelligence about German security arrangements around the bridge and suggested optimal timing for the operation. Her technical expertise transformed what could have been a difficult and uncertain mission into a surgical strike with predictable results. The bridge operation was scheduled for the night before the German offensive was set to begin. Elena would provide on-site guidance for the sabotage team while simultaneously conducting her own mission to disrupt German communications equipment. If everything went according to plan, the Germans would wake up to find their offensive stalled before it could begin. As Elena prepared for what would be her most dangerous mission, she reflected on how much had changed since she left her father's garage. She had become something she never imagined possible, a technical expert who could strike at the heart of enemy operations with precision and devastating effect. The quiet girl who fixed farm trucks had evolved into a weapon of extraordinary sophistication and deadly accuracy. But Elena also understood that her most challenging test still lay ahead. The bridge operation would put her directly in the path of the German offensive, and success would require perfect timing, flawless execution, and luck that had sustained her through months of operations behind enemy lines. For the first time since beginning her special operations career, Elena wondered if her luck was about to run out. The night of the bridge operation was approaching rapidly, and with it, Elena's appointment with destiny. In a few hours, she would either strike the most significant blow of her military career or disappear forever into the darkness behind enemy lines. Everything she had learned, everything she had become, would be tested in the crucible of this single night's work. The night of the bridge operation began with perfect weather conditions. A thick cloud cover blocked moonlight while providing enough ambient illumination for navigation, and a light snowfall would help conceal tracks and muffle sounds. Elena had positioned herself 2 kilometers from the target bridge, hidden in a grove of pine trees that offered excellent concealment while providing multiple escape routes. The sabotage team consisted of 6 combat engineers led by Senior Lieutenant Pavel Volkov, a specialist in demolitions who had worked with Elena on 2 previous missions. The engineers carried precisely calculated explosive charges based on Elena's technical analysis of the bridge structure, along with timing devices that would detonate the charges simultaneously for maximum effect. Elena's role was to provide overwatch and technical support while conducting her own mission to disable German communications equipment located at a command post near the bridge. The communications disruption would prevent German forces from coordinating their response to the bridge attack, buying precious time for the sabotage team to escape before enemy reinforcements could arrive. Everything went wrong from the first minute. As the sabotage team approached the bridge, they discovered that German security had been dramatically increased since Elena's last reconnaissance. Instead of the usual 4-man guard detail, the bridge was now protected by a full platoon of infantry supported by 2 armored vehicles. Worse, the Germans had installed powerful searchlights that swept the approaches to the bridge in overlapping patterns, making covert approach nearly impossible. Senior Lieutenant Volkov made the difficult decision to abort the mission. The increased security made success unlikely and casualties certain. He radioed Elena with the code phrase that meant "mission cancelled," expecting her to acknowledge and begin withdrawal procedures. But Elena was already committed to her part of the operation. She had infiltrated the German command post and was in the process of sabotaging their radio equipment when Volkov's cancellation message arrived. More importantly, she had discovered that the German offensive was scheduled to begin in 4 hours, not the next morning, as intelligence had indicated. If the bridge remained intact, 3 German armored divisions would cross it at dawn, launching an attack that could break through Soviet defenses and reach Stalingrad itself. Elena made a decision that would define the rest of her life. She radioed back to Volkov with a message that stunned the experienced demolitions expert. Continuing mission. Bridge must be destroyed. Suggest immediate withdrawal. Working alone, Elena began the most dangerous operation of her military career. She had studied the bridge structure extensively and knew exactly where to place charges for maximum effect, but she lacked the specialized demolitions training that Volkov's team possessed. Worse, she would have to improvise explosive devices using materials available at the German command post and her own limited supplies. Elena's mechanical knowledge proved crucial for solving the demolitions problem. She recognized that the command post's generator used the same type of fuel that could be weaponized with proper chemical additives. Working in the darkness of the generator shed, she began constructing improvised explosive devices using generator fuel, ammunition from German supply caches, and timing mechanisms salvaged from radio equipment. The devices she constructed weren't sophisticated, but they were precisely calculated to exploit the bridge's structural weaknesses. Elena had identified 4 critical support points, where simultaneous explosions would cause catastrophic failure of the entire span. Each device was carefully calibrated to produce exactly the right amount of force at exactly the right location. But building the explosives was only half the problem. Elena still had to place them on the bridge structure while avoiding detection by the German guards. The searchlights and increased patrols made covert approach extremely difficult, and Elena realized she would have to create a diversion to draw attention away from the bridge itself. Her solution was characteristically creative and dangerous. Elena sabotaged the command post's ammunition depot, setting up a delayed explosion that would occur 30 minutes after she left the area. The explosion would create chaos and draw every available German soldier to investigate, leaving the bridge temporarily unguarded while she placed her charges. Elena positioned her improvised explosive devices with mechanical precision, placing each charge exactly where it would do the most structural damage. She worked quickly but carefully, knowing that a single mistake would either ruin the operation or kill her instantly. The timing mechanisms were set to detonate simultaneously 15 minutes after activation, giving her enough time to reach minimum safe distance before the bridge collapsed. As she finished placing the last charge, Elena heard the ammunition depot explode in the distance. The explosion was larger than she had anticipated, sending flames hundreds of meters into the sky and creating a fireball that lit up the entire area. German soldiers immediately began running toward the explosion site, leaving the bridge momentarily undefended. Elena activated the timing devices and began her withdrawal. But she quickly realized that the ammunition explosion had created an unexpected problem. The massive fire was drawing German reinforcements from throughout the sector, and the roads Elena needed to use for escape were rapidly filling with enemy vehicles rushing toward the apparent attack site. Instead of attempting to flee immediately, Elena made another critical decision. She would use the confusion created by the ammunition explosion to inflict maximum damage on German forces before they could reorganize and respond to the bridge destruction. Her jeep was equipped with captured German weapons and ammunition, and she had detailed knowledge of German positions throughout the area. What followed was 15 minutes of precision warfare that would become legendary in Soviet military history. Elena attacked German vehicles and positions with surgical accuracy, striking at fuel trucks, ammunition carriers, and communication vehicles that were essential for coordinating military operations. She used her intimate knowledge of German equipment to target critical vulnerabilities, causing explosions and fires that spread chaos throughout their rear areas. The bridge charges detonated exactly on schedule, dropping the entire span into the river with a thunderous crash that could be heard for kilometers. But Elena was already 3 kilometers away, attacking a German fuel depot that supplied vehicles for 2 entire divisions. Her improvised incendiary devices turned hundreds of thousands of liters of gasoline and diesel fuel into an inferno that burned for 3 days. As German forces tried to respond to the multiple attacks, Elena continued her campaign of precision destruction. She attacked maintenance facilities that repaired German vehicles, supply dumps that fed German units, and communication centers that coordinated German operations. Each target was carefully chosen for maximum strategic impact, and each attack was executed with the technical expertise that made Elena uniquely dangerous. The Germans gradually realized they were facing a single, extraordinarily skilled opponent, but by then it was too late. Elena had inflicted crippling damage on their rear areas while avoiding direct confrontation with superior enemy forces. She struck from unexpected directions, hit targets that seemed impossible to reach, and disappeared before organized pursuit could develop. The body count mounted as German soldiers attempted to stop Elena's rampage. She eliminated sentries who discovered her approach routes, drivers who tried to intercept her vehicle, and technical personnel who might have been able to counter her sabotage. Each engagement was brief and decisive, with Elena using superior knowledge of terrain and equipment to achieve overwhelming tactical advantage. By dawn, 32 German soldiers were dead, and the entire offensive had been thrown into chaos. The bridge destruction had stranded heavy equipment on the wrong side of the river, while Elena's attacks on supply and maintenance facilities had crippled the support infrastructure that kept German forces operational. Most importantly, the communication disruption had prevented German commanders from understanding what was happening until it was too late to mount an effective response. Elena finally broke contact as daylight made continued operations impossible. She had expended most of her ammunition and fuel, and her jeep had suffered damage from enemy fire that required immediate repair. But she had accomplished something unprecedented. A single soldier had neutralized an entire enemy offensive through a combination of technical expertise, tactical brilliance, and extraordinary courage. As she drove towards Soviet lines through the morning mist, Elena reflected on what she had accomplished. The quiet girl who had learned to fix engines in her father's garage had just rewritten the rules of warfare, proving that individual skill and determination could achieve results that entire armies might struggle to accomplish. But Elena also knew that her actions had made her a priority target for German forces. Her success had been too dramatic and too damaging to ignore, and the enemy would spare no effort to hunt down the person responsible for their humiliation. The war had just become personal in ways that would test everything she had learned about survival and combat. The Germans now knew that somewhere in their rear areas a Soviet operative possessed skills and knowledge that made her uniquely dangerous. They would mobilize every available resource to find and eliminate this threat, and Elena's next challenge would be staying alive long enough to continue her mission. As she crossed into Soviet-controlled territory, Elena had no way of knowing that her greatest test was still ahead. The enemy was about to discover just how dangerous a truly motivated opponent could become, and the hunt for Elena Petrov was about to begin in earnest. The legend was born, but the story was far from over. The aftermath of Elena's bridge operation sent shockwaves through German command structures all the way to Berlin. Intelligence reports described an enemy agent with unprecedented technical skills and tactical capabilities, someone who could penetrate deep into German-controlled territory and inflict strategic damage far beyond what any single soldier should have been able to accomplish. Orders went out immediately. Find this operative and eliminate the threat at any cost. Colonel Heinrich Weber received the assignment personally from General Paulus himself. Weber was the Wehrmacht's leading expert on Soviet special operations, a man who had spent 2 years hunting partisan groups and saboteurs with remarkable success. His methods were thorough, systematic, and ruthless. He had never failed to eliminate a target once he began pursuit. Weber established his headquarters in the same town where Elena had conducted her bridge operation, studying the evidence she had left behind with the analytical mind that made him so effective. He reconstructed her movements hour by hour, analyzing her techniques and trying to understand the unique combination of skills that made her so dangerous. "This is not a typical saboteur," Weber told his staff during their first briefing. "This person has mechanical engineering knowledge equivalent to a trained technician, tactical skills that suggest formal military training, and operational security practices that indicate exceptional intelligence. We're dealing with someone who represents the evolution of Soviet special operations." Weber's investigation revealed the full scope of Elena's activities over the previous months. He connected dozens of mysterious equipment failures, supply disruptions, and communication breakdowns to a single operator, whose signature was becoming increasingly clear. The pattern showed someone who understood German equipment better than many German technicians, who could predict German tactical responses with uncanny accuracy, and who possessed an almost supernatural ability to avoid detection. Meanwhile, Elena had returned to Soviet lines for medical treatment and equipment resupply. Her actions during the bridge operation had earned her immediate promotion to senior lieutenant and assignment to an elite special operations unit that reported directly to front headquarters. More importantly, her success had proven the value of technical sabotage operations, and she was tasked with training other specialists in her unique methods. But Elena's greatest contribution wasn't her personal combat record. Her detailed reports on German equipment, tactics, and vulnerabilities provided Soviet intelligence with unprecedented insight into enemy operations. She had documented weaknesses in German vehicles that could be exploited by other saboteurs, identified patterns in German supply operations that could be disrupted by conventional forces, and revealed security procedures that could be circumvented by properly trained agents. The training program Elena developed became the foundation for a new type of Soviet special operations. Students learned not just how to fight behind enemy lines, but how to think like engineers and technicians. They studied mechanical systems, electrical networks, and chemical processes that could be weaponized against enemy equipment. Most importantly, they learned to see warfare as a technical problem that could be solved through precise application of scientific knowledge. Elena's influence spread throughout Soviet special operations as her students graduated and began their own missions. Reports began flowing in from across the front of German equipment failures, supply disruptions, and communication breakdowns that bore the distinctive signature of Elena's methods. The Germans found themselves fighting an enemy who attacked their technology rather than their soldiers, who struck at the mechanical foundations of modern warfare rather than engaging in direct combat. Colonel Weber gradually realized the scope of what he was facing. The bridge operation hadn't been the work of a single exceptional agent, but the beginning of a systematic campaign to undermine German technical superiority through targeted sabotage. Elena had created a new form of warfare, and her techniques were spreading throughout Soviet special operations like a virus through a computer network. "We're not hunting one person anymore," Weber told his superiors in a classified report. we're facing an entire school of specially trained technicians who understand our equipment better than we do. This represents a fundamental shift in how the Soviets are conducting irregular warfare. Weber's assessment was correct, but it came too late to matter. Elena's influence had already spread beyond any possibility of containment, and her methods were being adapted and improved by dozens of other operators. The technical knowledge she had gained in her father's garage had become the foundation for a revolution in military tactics that would influence warfare for decades to come. Elena herself continued operations throughout the winter of 1942, conducting increasingly sophisticated missions that demonstrated the full potential of technical sabotage. She penetrated German research facilities to steal technical documents, infiltrated manufacturing centers to sabotage production equipment, and coordinated with other agents to conduct synchronized attacks that could cripple entire military formations. Her most significant achievement was the development of delayed action sabotage techniques that could remain dormant for weeks or months before activating. Elena created chemical compounds that would gradually corrode critical engine components, causing catastrophic failures long after she had left the area. She designed mechanical devices that would trigger equipment malfunctions after specific operating conditions were met, making her sabotage virtually impossible to detect until it was too late. These techniques were particularly devastating because they created uncertainty throughout German ranks. Soldiers began to question the reliability of their own equipment, wondering if every mechanical failure might be the result of enemy action. Maintenance personnel spent countless hours searching for sabotage that might not exist, while genuine equipment problems went unrepaired because they were assumed to be enemy attacks. The psychological impact of Elena's operations eventually became more important than their direct military effect. German forces began to suffer from a form of technical paranoia, where every malfunction was assumed to be sabotage and every repair was suspected of being inadequate. This uncertainty eroded confidence in equipment reliability and reduced operational effectiveness throughout German formations. Elena's final documented mission took place in spring 1943, when she led a team of 12 specialists in a coordinated attack on German manufacturing facilities in occupied Ukraine. The operation was designed to demonstrate the full potential of technical sabotage, hitting multiple targets simultaneously with precision strikes that would cripple German production for months. The mission succeeded beyond all expectations, but Elena paid the ultimate price for her success. German forces had finally developed effective countermeasures against her techniques, and Colonel Weber had positioned his resources to intercept her team during their withdrawal. Elena was captured during a firefight that cost the lives of 6 German soldiers and delayed German pursuit long enough for most of her team to escape. Elena Petrov died in German custody 3 days later, but not before providing her interrogators with a final demonstration of her capabilities. She had sabotaged her own prison transport, causing it to break down in a location where Soviet partisans could attack her captors. Elena died during the rescue attempt, but her sacrifice allowed 2 other captured specialists to escape with critical intelligence about German countermeasures. The impact of Elena's death rippled throughout Soviet special operations, but her influence continued to grow rather than diminish. Her techniques had been codified in training manuals, her methods had been adopted by hundreds of other operators, and her example had inspired an entire generation of technical warriors who saw sabotage as a science rather than an art. Colonel Weber survived the war and wrote extensively about his pursuit of Elena and her network. His post-war analysis concluded that Elena Petrov had single-handedly revolutionized irregular warfare, transforming it from a primitive harassment technique into a sophisticated form of technological combat that anticipated many aspects of modern cyber warfare. She understood that modern armies are fundamentally dependent on their technology, Weber wrote in his memoir. By attacking that technology with scientific precision, she achieved strategic effects that conventional forces might have required months of combat to accomplish. She was fighting a different war than the rest of us, and she was winning. Elena's village was liberated by Soviet forces in late 1943, and the villagers who survived the war erected a monument to their quiet neighbor who had become something legendary. The inscription was simple: Elena Petrov, 1920-1943. She could drive anything. But Elena's true monument was the transformation she had brought to military thinking. Her combination of technical expertise and tactical brilliance had proven that individual specialists could achieve strategic effects through precise application of scientific knowledge. Her methods influenced special operations doctrine for decades, and her example inspired countless other soldiers to see warfare as a technical challenge that could be solved through intelligence and innovation. Years later, when military historians studied the Eastern Front, They would identify Elena Petrov as one of the most significant individual contributors to Soviet victory, not because of the enemy soldiers she had killed, but because of the new form of warfare she had created. She had shown that in an age of technological warfare, the most dangerous enemy might not be the one with the most guns, but the one who best understood how the guns worked. Elena never lived to see the war's end, but her influence shaped its outcome in ways that extended far beyond any single battle or campaign. The quiet girl from the village garage had become something unprecedented, a technical warrior whose knowledge was her weapon and whose understanding of mechanical systems made her unstoppable. Her legend lived on in the manuals her students wrote, the techniques her followers developed, and the countless missions that succeeded because someone remembered what Elena Petrov had taught about the intersection of engineering and warfare. She had proven that sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't what you carry in your hands, but what you understand in your mind. In the end, Elena Petrov had done exactly what they said she couldn't do. They said she was only a driver, but she had driven straight into history, leaving tire tracks that would never be erased, and proving that the most dangerous enemy is often the one you never see coming until it's far too late to stop them. Her story became a reminder that heroes come in unexpected forms, that knowledge is the ultimate weapon, and that sometimes the most extraordinary achievements begin with the simplest skills learned in the humblest places. Elena Petrov started as a girl who could fix engines, but she became something that changed the nature of warfare itself. The enemy had learned too late what Elena Petrov could really do.